Up to now, the stories I've shared with you were born from ancient pacts, from whispered legends and fears hidden in the folds of folklore. These were secrets guarded by communities, by families, by traditions. But there's another kind of secret, a more modern, colder, and perhaps more relentless type, the corporate secret. Large industries, in their incessant search for resources, dig deeper than any explorer, map territories no government knows, and sometimes they find things. Things that weren't on geological maps, anomalies that defy science and common sense. And when that happens, the protocol isn't superstition or prayer. It's a confidentiality agreement, a mass dismissal, a fabricated bankruptcy, silence bought with money and fear. When I last spoke to you, we were on solid ground with a mystery in our hands. The diary of a dead captain and the story of a monstrous egg fished from the seabed. I made you a promise that I would follow this story to its end, no matter how deep I had to go. Today, I fulfill that promise. I'm not speaking from my flat in London. I'm speaking from a cramped cabin aboard the Ocean Pioneer, a deep-sea research vessel floating over the Atlantic Ocean. And in a few hours, 2 other crew members and I will enter the Neptune, a titanium submersible, to descend to more than 4,000 meters deep. We are returning to the nest, to the exact location where the crew of the Ocean Soul met their fate. We will see what they left behind and discover what answered the call of the creature they unleashed. Good evening or good morning. I am the Abyss Watcher. Today's story is the conclusion of our expedition. It is the real-time narration of our descent into the largest and most unexplored environment on our planet. A place without light, with crushing pressure, and which, as we will discover, is not as empty as we thought. What did the crew of the Ocean Soul awaken? And the mother that the newborn creature called ... is she still there? That's what we're going to find out. And before we close the hatch, if you've been on this journey with me from the beginning, leave your like to wish me luck on this descent. And if you're new, subscribe to the Abyss Watcher channel and hit the bell, because this is the most ambitious and dangerous expedition we've ever undertaken, and all positive energy is welcome. The countdown to the dive has already begun. Let's go together. Getting a place on this expedition was a miracle of bureaucracy and luck. The company responsible, a multinational marine geology firm, was officially investigating magnetic anomalies on the mid-Atlantic ridge, the perfect excuse to explore the area without raising suspicion. I joined as a journalist and documentarian, tasked with recording the wonder of deep-sea exploration. They didn't know the true nature of what I was looking for. The crew of the Ocean Pioneer were the elite of oceanography, skeptical professionals, driven by data and facts. My submersible team consisted of 2 other people, Dr. Eleanor Reed, a brilliant and curious marine biologist, and Isabel, the pilot of the Neptune. Isabel was a former naval officer, a stoic woman whose calm in the face of descending into one of the planet's most hostile environments was almost superhuman. The Neptune itself was a titanium sphere just over 2 meters in diameter, claustrophobic, a fragile bubble of technology suspended in the darkness by a single cable. Our only window to the outside world was a small reinforced glass porthole and the high-definition screens of the external cameras. The descent began. The first 1,000 meters still had sunlight, a deep, wonderful blue. We saw shoals, alien-shaped jellyfish. But as we descended, the light vanished. The blue turned indigo, then purple, and then absolute black. The so-called midnight zone. The only light came from our submersible's powerful headlights, revealing a constant rain of marine snow, organic matter slowly drifting down to the bottom. And the pressure. Every 100 meters, the onboard computer announced the increase in external pressure, an invisible, crushing force that constantly reminded us we were in a place where we shouldn't be. 2,000 meters, announced Isabel's calm voice. "System stable. 3,000 meters," she said, half an hour later. "Passing through the aphotic zone. No sign of macroscopic life." The silence inside the sphere was broken only by the hum of electronics and our own breathing. It was a hypnotic and terrifying journey. A trip to the center of an unknown planet that, by chance, was our own. 4,200 meters, Isabel finally said. "We have reached the ocean floor." Initiating terrain scan, the screens showed a desert of sand and volcanic rock, a world of silence and darkness, which had existed for millions of years. And we were the intruders. We slowly navigated over the seabed for almost an hour, following the coordinates from Captain Arthur Miller's diary. The landscape was monotonous, an endless desert. Dr. Eleanor Reed was fascinated, collecting data, analyzing the soil composition. Isabel piloted with steely calm. And I was looking for a sign. "Isabel, there, to your right," I said, pointing to the sonar screen. "There's a depression in the terrain, large and circular." "I see it," she replied. "Unusual geological anomaly. We'll check it out." She maneuvered the Neptune towards the anomaly, and when our headlights illuminated the spot, the three of us fell into absolute silence. It was the nest, a perfectly circular crater, almost 100 meters in diameter. It was as if a meteorite had fallen there, but the edges were too smooth, too organized, and scattered around and inside the crater were fragments. Pieces of black, smooth, non-reflective rock, the remains of the egg's shell. "What formation is this?" asked Dr. Eleanor Reed, her voice full of awe. "It doesn't match anything I've ever seen. The composition of this rock, ... It's not volcanic," but I barely heard her. My attention was on something else. At the bottom of the crater, partially buried by sand, was the proof. A tangle of broken steel cables and, unmistakable, a gigantic titanium claw. The remains of the Ocean Soul's winch. "We're in the right place," I said, my voice lower than I intended. Isabel and Eleanor looked at me, confused. Before I could explain, an alarm sounded on the panel. "What was that?" I asked. "Hydrophone," replied Isabel, looking at one of the monitors. "I'm picking up a low-frequency sound, very low, and it sounds ... biological. But it's not a whale. The pattern is too complex." She increased the gain, filtered the noise, and put the sound on the internal speaker. It was the song. The same song Captain Arthur Miller described. The same sad, hypnotic melody. But now it didn't come from a stone. It came from the ocean around us, and it seemed to come from all directions at once. "Incredible," said Dr. Eleanor Reed, already recording and analyzing. "A new form of bioacoustic communication." But I felt a chill. That wasn't communication. It was a call that had been answered. The nest was empty, but the hatchling and the mother, they were nearby. We spent the next hour collecting data. Or rather, Dr. Eleanor Reed collected data. Isabel and I were paralyzed. The song was constant, a sonic presence that seemed to infiltrate the submarine's hull and vibrate in our skulls. "My head is throbbing," Isabel suddenly said, massaging her temples. "I'm turning off the external audio." She pressed a button. The song disappeared from the speakers. Silence returned. But the expression on Isabel's face didn't change. "It didn't help," she said, her voice strained. "I can still hear it." Inside my head, Eleanor and I exchanged glances. The psychic influence the diary described, it was happening again. It was affecting us. "Isabel, I think we should surface," I said, trying to stay calm. "Negative," she replied, her voice cold, professional. "We still have a 2-hour exploration window. The mission needs to be completed." But her eyes were fixed on the darkness ahead, as if she were hearing an order from someone else. Here begins what's truly scary. That's when a new alarm sounded. This time, from the long-range sonar. "Movement," said Isabel, her voice now a robotic monotone. "Massive object approaching, coming from below." We all looked at the sonar screen. A shapeless red mass was rising from the abyss below us, heading towards us. And it was gigantic. The scale on the screen indicated a size of 1, perhaps 2 kilometers in length. "That's impossible," Dr. Eleanor Reed stammered. "It's a system error, a malfunction. An animal that size doesn't exist." "It's not an animal," I said, remembering Captain Arthur Miller's nightmares. "It's a city." The mass on the sonar screen continued to rise. Slow, majestic, indifferent. It wasn't hunting us. It was simply passing us on its route. And the song ... The song in our heads became deafening. We didn't see it directly. How do you see a mountain when you're at its foot? We saw the effects of its passage. The Neptune's headlights, which once illuminated hundreds of meters ahead, now illuminated nothing. A colossal shadow had swallowed us, blocking all light. We were in total darkness, except for the lights on our panel. The water around us began to move. These weren't currents. It was displacement. We felt our small submarine being pushed aside, like a paper boat in the wake of an ocean liner. And through the glass porthole, we saw dot lights. Faint, bioluminescent lights, moving in geometric patterns in the darkness outside, like the windows of a city at night, slowly passing by us. There were millions of them. "What is that?" Eleanor whispered, her face pressed against the glass. "What are we seeing?" And then the sonar managed a partial reading of the form. The screen drew a fragmented image of an impossible structure. It wasn't organic, but it wasn't mechanical either. It was both. An architecture of angles that shouldn't exist, a living geometry that seemed to pulsate in sync with the song in our minds. It was the mother, the creature the captain feared, the being that was called from its abyssal sleep. And that's when Isabel turned to the control panel. Her eyes were glazed over, white. "They're inviting us," she said, in a voice that wasn't hers. "We need to go. We need to join the city." Her hands moved towards the thruster controls. She was going to throw us towards that ... thing. "Isabel, no!" shouted Eleanor, trying to hold her arms. I threw myself on her. It was a bizarre struggle, in near-zero gravity, inside a metal sphere at the bottom of the ocean. Eleanor and I against our pilot, who fought with a supernatural strength, her eyes fixed on the darkness outside. "She wants to take us home," Isabel screamed, her voice now a mix of hers and the alien song. I managed to reach the emergency panel. I slammed my hand on the big red button with the inscription "Emergency Ascent." The submarine lurched violently and began to ascend. Fast, the colossal shadow was left behind. The last thing we saw on the sonar screen was the gigantic mass changing course and slowly beginning to ascend towards the surface, in the direction from which the ocean soul had disappeared. The ascent was in silence. Isabel fainted, and we stayed there, rising from the darkness, knowing that we had witnessed the oldest and best-kept secret of our planet. We are back on the surface. Isabel has been sedated and is under medical care. She remembers nothing. The official expedition report will mention volcanic gases causing mass hallucinations and defective sonar readings. The ocean's secret will remain a secret. I know what I saw, and I know that this journey, which began with the captain's diary, taught me a final lesson. I looked for monsters in forests, in basements, in mines, in the sky. But the true titans, the primordial forces, they were always here, in the depths, waiting in silence. This expedition also taught me something else. That the greatest horrors are not only those we experience, those we discover in reality. There are other types of horror, equally powerful. Those that are meticulously created for us. Interactive stories that make us feel fear on our skin, that put us in the place of the protagonist. And in our next season here on The Abyss Watcher, we're going to do something different. We're going to explore these worlds. I'm going to delve into the narratives of some of the greatest horror games ever made, such as The Last of Us, A Quiet Place, The Road Ahead, Until Dawn, The Quarry, and the upcoming The Casting of Frank Stone. And I'm going to recount them here, in our style, as if they were just another one of my investigative cases. We're going to analyze the anatomy of created fear. Get ready, because we're going to start investigating the nightmares that were born to be played. If this journey to the bottom of the sea left you breathless, and if you're ready for our new phase, subscribe to the Abyss Watcher channel and hit the bell, because what's coming will be unlike anything we've ever done. Leave your like if you survived this 2-part expedition. Thank you for diving with me. And remember, the map of our world still has many blank spaces. Until next season.